and I'll share the screen. Yeah, I guess it's Sunday. I don't know. Anyway, so let's share the screen here. Share the screen. So you can see what I'm seeing. All right. Yeah, I was actually in the process of clearing the recording when I said, oh, it's 3 o'clock, let's get everybody in. And it just, yeah, straight up froze. So it's done that to me before. I don't know if it's on my end or if it's just a glitch in the program. Who knows? Anyway, not a big deal. We'll just keep an eye on the clock. All right. So today we get to discuss the circulatory systems. And remember that nothing that we discuss today will be on Thursday's test. This will all carry over to our second test, which I believe is the July 11th date. So let me go back and open up the salvo chapters. We actually see that there is a combination of discussion when we're talking circulatory system. In other words, the circulatory system really isn't a thing. The circulatory system bundles two different body systems into one. And so what happens is we have the cardiovascular system and the lymph vascular system. All right, so both are separate chapters, but we're going to combine them. So the cardiovascular system, I'll show you what it looks like here. I remember I had chapter 27 open, lymph vascular, earlier, and I had to close it out or when I shut my computer down, it closed all my programs down. But the cardiovascular system, chapter 26, and the lymph vascular system, chapter 27, they are the combined circulatory systems. So let's go ahead and talk what that means. So cardiovascular versus lymph vascular, the two, if you will, divisions or subdivisions of the circulatory system, are a set of vessels with material moving in the vessels for delivery throughout the body. The cardiovascular side, there's a heart, which is the cardio part, pushing blood into vessels. The heart is creating a type of squeeze, or if you will, a type of push, pressure that forces blood into blood vessels. And with each beat of the heart, the blood is pushed further and further and further and further away from the heart. So as long as you have a material that is effective in delivering what the body's cells need, then the goal is create a pressurized system where every squeeze of the heart pushes more blood in the direction of the cells so that the cells can benefit from the components of blood. So the cardiovascular discussion, when we talk about the heart and we talk about the blood vessels and we talk about the blood, we're talking about all these parts that come together to ultimately bring material to cells of your body. So if we talk about the cardiovascular system as a system and we say this is what it's for, the easiest way to describe the cardiovascular system is to compare it to Amazon. You know, Amazon right now, if you want to buy something, you don't have to go to the store. You can go online, you can order from Amazon, and it will be delivered to your home or wherever you want it delivered, okay? And you can get clothing, hardware, food, medicine, right? Anything you need right now, you could probably go online and order it and have it delivered to you. In other words, you don't have to physically go out and travel to the grocery store to get food, to the pharmacy to get medicine, to the hardware store to get things to fix your house. You know, you can have it all delivered to you. The cardiovascular system is your body's delivery system. And what it does is it allows cells that are part of a fixed community in your body, it allows those cells to have access to oxygen from the air, to nutrients from your food, to hormones from your endocrine system, to immune cells, medicine that you would take orally or intramuscularly or subcutaneously or intravenously, whatever you need to deliver to the cells that the cells can use for their metabolism, the cardiovascular system can deliver. And since you're already bringing stuff to the cells, use that same delivery system to be a waste removal system so that the cells don't have to festinate in their own wastes. You can remove the waste away from the cells and then eliminate those wastes from the body, and everything's happy. The cells are happy, right? See, in a microbiology world, let's say you're talking about a single amoeba in a pond. That amoeba has to rummage for food. It has to protect itself. It has to acquire oxygen on its own, right? It has to do all that. And who knows how long an amoeba lives? I have no idea how long an amoeba lives, but probably not very long. When it's time for that amoeba to replicate, it clones itself, and two amoebas are formed, all new daughter cells or whatever, with those both amoeba now responsible for their own hunting and gathering and protecting and controlling self-environment, all that good stuff. All right. You're estimated to be anywhere between what, 37 trillion to 100, almost 100 trillion cells. And most of those cells are not going out and rummaging for food, are not exposed to the fluids with oxygen in it, are not getting, I mean, they're just not able to go out and hunt around. They're part of a fixed area. So instead of those cells going out, everything's brought to them. The cardiovascular system is a closed network of vessels that can deliver all of what the cells need to the cells for their metabolic processes and remove waste from the cells. Even if you're trying to protect the cells, you've got a delivery system to quickly mobilize an army of immune cells that can come to the aid of those cells when under assault from bacteria or virus or cancer or trauma even. And you've got a delivery system to quickly get other cells of the body to the aid of the cells that are under assault. And that's what the immune system is, right? That's what the immune cells do. They will travel through the blood vessels until they get to the site where the war is being waged, if you will, and then they'll leave the blood vessels and they'll come to the aid of the cells of the body and defend you against the foreign invaders of the body. That is a pretty fantastic thing. And all that is a component of this cardiovascular system. Now, the lymph vascular side does help with some more, if you will, movement of material. But what we typically see on the lymphatic side is instead of the delivery, it's more involved in the removal. It's more involved in clearing out the excess, clearing out the waste. It's open-ended on the cellular side. It will eventually clean and clean and clean all this dirty waste until all the material is put back into the cardiovascular system, and then it's part of a closed loop again. But that'll make more sense when we actually talk about the lymphatics and the lymph vascular structures relative to the cardiovascular system. All right, so when I was in school, we didn't have Amazon, we didn't have Uber Eats or DoorDash, or I've got a buddy who, he and his wife and two kids, they hardly ever go to the grocery store. They're hungry. They don't want to leave the house. They are DoorDash experts, if you will. I bet you they use DoorDash 2-3 times a day, every day. I'd be willing to bet. He's even told me some stories about their food delivery being, they get a call from their DoorDash person and they're somewhere on the other side of St. Louis from where he lives. Is like, we're not even in that area. I don't know how that DoorDash person ended up way over there. I don't know. I've never used DoorDash. I've never used Uber Eats. I've had Amazon stuff delivered to the house. I understand the concept of it. I personally like to go to the store myself. I like to go out and do that stuff. But your cells in your body, they don't have that luxury. They don't have, and in fact, we don't really want them to all have to be independent in obtaining their own nutrients and acquiring their own oxygen. So since those cells aren't able to go out and do that, let's go ahead and bring all that to them. And so that's the point. If your cells are part of a community, if you will, here in this slide says embedded. I mean, I don't care if you say embedded or not. I just know that I've got layers and layers of tissues in my body, cells upon cells, and you know, like the muscle cells in my calf, they're not going to come to the surface of the skin and you know try to find oxygen. They're not. Look, I have the air hitting my skin, and I have the air hitting my lungs, and I have the air hitting my mouth, and there is some perfusion of gas between those membranes to where some of the cells are exposed to oxygen, but not nearly enough. So instead, I've got to get that air into my lungs where the lungs are real thin, where I can have a nice quick transfer of oxygen and that can get into my bloodstream. And then those red blood cells of my blood will bind to that oxygen and physically hold on to that molecule until it's delivered in the body, where the cells that are in demand of that oxygen actually encourage the red blood cells to release that oxygen. And now that oxygen is right there at the membrane of the cells that are adjacent to this very, very tiny blood vessels that the blood cells are in. So ultimately, we'll get to a discussion of blood vessels, and which are the pipe system. And the pipes go from being really quite large to being microscopically small. And no cell in the body is too far away from a capillary to where it can't, which is the tiny blood vessel, by the way. Cells are very, very close to this network of capillaries, which allow those cells access to the blood in the capillaries. So think of it this way. You've got big old water mains that bring water into your neighborhood, and then a smaller pipe brings water into your home, and then smaller pipes from that branch out throughout your house until you know your sinks and your you know, whatever pipes you have where water can be obtained, whether it's a bathtub, whether it's a you know, bathroom sink, a kitchen sink, or you know, the hoses that go to your washing machine or your dishwasher. You know, these are all ways to get water into the system. You know, I would never want to stick my head into a water main to take a sip of water. There's way too much movement of water, way too much volume of water, way too much pressure. That wouldn't be good. But when it comes into the house and I open up the tap and it comes out through the tap or whatnot, I can put my cup under it and it fills very easily, right? I don't have to put my cup into this high pressure water main, right? So the body's kind of like that also. Blood vessels get smaller and smaller and smaller until the blood is in tiny microscopic blood vessels that are so small, they're only one cell layer thick. And adjacent to those one cell layer thick capillaries are the cells that are waiting for all this delivery. And those are the cells that take from that particular capillary. And if that capillary is injured or if it breaks or what, those cells are so regenerative that new capillaries form so that they are again amongst the cells that require the delivery of material from all of your other body systems. So if cells are too far from the blood supply, they'll die. Sometimes cells make material and those cells end up becoming cut off from the blood supply. They will then die, just leaving their matrix of material, like, for example, cartilage. Cartilage cells, as they mature and as they lay down cartilage, they become somewhat sequestered from the blood supply. Those cartilage cells that are closest to the blood supply, they're around a bit longer, they live longer, and they're still capable of mitosis and division and all that. But eventually they get pushed a little too far from the blood supply. They get embedded in their matrix, they die, just leaving that matrix, which means that you've got the structure of cartilage as intended, but now if there's any damage to that cartilage, if there's any degeneration of that cartilage, it's not going to replace because the cells that would be necessary for that, they're not there anymore. They've died off. So it's part of this lifespan, if you will, of the hyaline cartilage of your body, where it develops very, very well during your growing years. But once you hit adulthood, it's much more likely that you're seeing degeneration of the cartilage rather than growth and development of the cartilage. And so by the time we're 40, 50, 60 years old, a number of areas of cartilage, especially in weight-bearing joints, has demonstrated degeneration, erosion, breaking, cracking, and it's the beginning of the arthritis that we talked about in the first semester. If you haven't had the first semester yet, we'll eventually talk about how the bones of your body that move upon each other rely on the smoother cap of cartilage between those surfaces so that movement is much more fluid. But if that cartilage becomes roughened or broken or cracked, it can make for much more complicated movement. And over time, there's more and more wear and tear on those specific surfaces. And that is what we'll see as osteoarthritis. But the thing is that the cartilage cells, because they get too far from the capillary network, they're going to die. They can only live so long without oxygen, without nutrients, without the benefits of what blood brings to cells of the body. So the cardiovascular system is the more vital of the two circulatory systems. The lymph vascular system is important. The lymph vascular system is beneficial, but as far as our vitality, cardiovascular is much more important. In fact, we still to this day determine death when our heart stops. Okay, so you've probably seen many movies, TV shows, or whatnot, where a person's in the emergency room and they're on heart monitors, and something happens, and they go through what's called cardiac arrest, and you hear the flat line of on the screen, right? You see the doctors paddles clear, boom, and still, and then finally go, okay, we're going to call it, and that's the time of death. That doesn't mean that all of your body has died, right? Because when your heart stops, that means no oxygen-rich blood flow, nutrient-rich blood flow is going to make it to your brain. And it still takes however many minutes before you start to experience the type of death to the brain, which is different than the heart stopping, right? So, however long that takes, for 7, 9, 10 minutes, whatever, before you start to see the loss of brain activity. I don't need to even speculate how long it is, or there's no reason for us to even look it up. But in the hospital, time of death is when the heart stops beating. The heart is a muscular organ. We will talk about it, and we will talk about its 4 muscular chambers. The cells of the heart that are muscle cells anyway, they're interconnected to each other. They've been contracting and relaxing on their own since well before you were born. In fact, I want to say it's day 21. That number sticks in my head as far as from the point of embryological development. I want to say it's around 3 weeks or 21 days, you start to see evidence of the beating heart. I'm not really sure why that number pops in my head. It's probably because I've said it before, but I'm pretty sure it's around 21 days. Either way, the cells will become bigger. They will become more interconnected. They will develop into their chambers, and they have their own conduction. They contract and relax on their own. The brain doesn't tell those muscles to contract or relax. Okay? The nervous system doesn't tell your heart muscles to contract and relax. All the nervous system does is speeds it up or slows it down. Faster, faster, slower, slower, faster, faster, slower, slower, right? And that's the sympathetic and parasympathetic side of the nervous system that we've been discussing the last few weeks that will be on the test Thursday. Sympathetic is going to increase the rate at which your heart muscle contracts, and parasympathetic will decrease the rate at which your heart muscle will contract. So for the cardiovascular discussion of the heart, we talk about its own conduction, and we also talk about a rate at which we expect that conduction. In other words, How many contractions will we expect in a minute from this heart muscle? So when mom is getting closer and closer to her delivery date, many obstetricians will put on a fetal heart monitor over the area of the pelvis and the abdomen, where the monitor can hear baby's heart beating. And typically it's beating quickly, often twice as fast as what yours would be. Yours is going to contract and relax and contract and relax on average around 72 to 75 beats per minute, somewhere between 60 and 90, 60 to 100 beats per minute when you're at rest. Baby's going to be 140, 160, even around 200 while listening to a fetal heart monitor. Look, if you're sitting there right now listening to this lecture and your heart is beating 200 times per minute, you're probably not comfortable. You're probably not relaxed and breathing slowly and calmly, and I would be curious as to why your heart is beating 200 times every minute. And I'd almost suggest that you turn off this lecture and you go to the urgent care and figure out why that is, because it's way too fast. The other side of that is, if your heart's only beating 20 times per minute while you're listening to this, are you in deep meditation? What's going on? Why is your heart beating so slow? We want more rate of contraction because that continues the steady push of blood that's rich in oxygen, that's rich in nutrients, that's capable of delivering all of what the cells need with every single beat. And we don't want that to stop. We want that continuous flow. It's a continuous cycle. It's that conveyor belt of material being brought. The next time you go to Tokyo, Japan, if you've never been there, I highly recommend it. Or the next time you go to a sushi restaurant, maybe I don't know of too many in the St. Louis area, but Las Vegas and New York for sure, they have some that are designed to where the sushi chefs, as they prepare little plates, they'll put the plate onto a conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt will go around. And when you are ready, or you like a certain dish that comes, you take that and you eat it, and you hold on your plate. Each plate is color coded or has the pricing of the dish you just ate, and then when you go to check out, you just hand them the plates and they add up your plates, and that's how much you pay. I think it's pretty neat. But the conveyor belt system, it works really well, at least for the delivery. Now, if let's say that you didn't hold on to your plates, and once you're done, you put your plate back on the conveyor belt and it took your plate into the kitchen to go clean it up, that's much more like what we're seeing with our cardiovascular system. The heart is what's pushing the conveyor belt, and the plates of food are the material being delivered to the patrons. Your body cells are essentially the patrons, the cells there waiting to receive what's being delivered on the conveyor belt, which is the vasculature delivering the material to the patrons. And then as the patrons utilize that material and wastes are created, well, then you can use that same conveyor belt, but on the return side, to remove those wastes. And since you're already using conveyor belt to deliver food, let's go ahead and throw some oxygen on there. All right, I just got some hits of oxygen, and let's go ahead and throw some immune cells on there, so that if there's any bacteria or fungus, or that your immune cells can protect the patrons of the body. A quick delivery system of getting the immune cells from where they're made, either in the bone marrow, in the lymph nodes, in the thymus gland, in the spleen, wherever those immune cells might be. How can you get them to quickly mobilize and get to where they need to be? There are some immune cells, like right now, if you were to look at your skin, there are immune cells embedded in your skin, and they're monitoring the system, and they're going to go ahead and put up their periscopes, which are going to come to the surface of your skin, and they're going to sample the bacteria. And let's say that they come in contact, there's a sampling of something that you've encountered before. Well, those white blood cells that are part of your skin, they're going to retract their little periscopes, what you listen to the heart and lungs with. A periscope is what I'm thinking of. the thing a submarine, yes, the thing a submarine actually uses, right? Your cells have something very similar that your immune cells do. And so those immune cells will actually recognize that there's an antigen on bacteria and go, uh-oh, we need to get more of a fleet here. They'll leave the skin, they'll travel to lymph nodes, they'll tell the cells of the lymph nodes, hey, I just came in contact with this type of bacteria that's a bad bacteria. We don't want it in the body. So the lymph nodes will start, at least the white blood cells and lymph nodes will start multiplying, and then they'll leave the lymph nodes, they'll travel to that area around the skin where that sampling was, they'll go on attack mode, they'll destroy all the bacteria or whatever has that antigen on it, and then if everything's hunky-dory, the white blood cells will go back to the lymph nodes and wait for the next event. It's immunology, it's immunity, it's our body's natural ability to protect us from pathogens. So the chat, just sharing the anime cells at work. Okay, so yeah, if you've never heard of cells at work, cells at work is Japanese anime, and it shows little people. They are red blood cells. The police force, army force, whatever, they're the white blood cells. And the bad guys are usually viruses or bacteria or something. And yeah, so it's the Japanese way of trying to teach kids about our body's immune system and cardiovascular system. So yeah, check it out sometime. Especially if you like anime, you might find that it's pretty neat. And there is a lot of learning from that to where you go, okay, they're talking about this type of immune response, or they're talking about this type of blood response. So yeah, it's called Cells at Work. And Osmosis Jones, a little different. Osmosis Jones is Chris Rock. He's a white blood cell that's on the hunt for Drax, the virus that's trying to take down Frank. Frank is Bill Murray. So you get real life acting from Bill Murray and his daughter and his friend who's his, who he calls the uncle of the girl. Anyway, Osmosis Jones, with the help of a cold pill, voiced by David Hyde Pierce, is on the hunt for a virus. The virus is trying to break a record and take down Frank, and then he's going to take down Frank's daughter in record time. And Osmosis Jones is a white blood cell. His job is to, well, stop Drax and defend Frank at all costs. And so that's a movie done by the Farrelly brothers. And so it's funny, it's humorous. After you've taken an anatomy class, definitely watch Osmosis Jones. You'll pick up on a lot of the subtle innuendos, the nuances of the comedy side plus the anatomy, physiology, medical side, and it makes for a slightly better viewing, I think, anyway. My personal opinion is if you know a little bit about this anatomy and physiology, you'll find some of the underlying jokes a little bit better. So Cells at Work, not so funny, more just anime, bad guys, good guys, and then Osmosis Jones, a little bit more comic value to it. In fact, at one point, Chris Rock even calls the actress that's voicing the mayor's secretary, who he has a crush on, Osmosis Jones has a crush on. Her character name, if I remember right, is Leah, but the actress is named Brandy. And at one point, Chris Rock jokingly goes, Brandy, I mean Leah. And they actually kept it in the movie. They thought it was funny. So, I don't know. Okay, so this section of cardiovascular with the lymph vascular, because both will be on the test, cardiovascular and lymph vascular, means that we're going to have a discussion on the cardio part, which is the heart, the vascular part, which is the blood vessels, excuse me, what's in the vessels, which is the blood, plus the lymphatic vessels, including lymph nodes, and what's in the lymphatic vessels called lymph. So there's lots of different pieces. The heart will have its discussion, the vessels will have their discussion, the blood will have its discussion, the lymph vessels their discussion, the lymph and immunity. So it's like a bunch of little discussions, and then we put it all together and say, all right, now this is your cardiovascular and lymph vascular systems combined as the circulatory system. There are a lot of different ways to teach it. We could teach the heart first, We could teach the blood first. We usually don't introduce the vessels until we've talked about the heart and the blood. But like, for example, when I teach in Missouri, it's heart first, then blood vessels next, then blood, then lymphatic structures, then lymph and immunity. But Salvo does blood first, then blood vessels and heart, et cetera, et cetera. So like if I go here to the next slide, I don't know why I didn't go, there you go. We get into what the blood is. So I'm going to follow Salvo because that way you can, when reading chapter 26, you'll have this fluidity as far as instead of jumping over to the heart and then I'm going to go with the order that the chapter has it. Sound good? Okay. So we'll be talking about the blood and then the blood vessels, which again is piping, or if you, there are a lot of anatomy instructors out there that call the blood vessels the highway system. I get it. Even Osmosis Jones, when they're in their car chases, it's on the blood vessels. It's a highway system, right? The blood that's leaving my heart goes through a major blood vessel that's like this humongous interstate. And then it has branches, it has roads that come off of it. And then the blood goes on this road or that road or that road. And then it goes from a larger avenue to a smaller boulevard, to a smaller road, to a smaller lane. Eventually, it comes into the driveways where the cells are. And each cell is able to just get all that delivery to them. All right. So let's talk physiology. Let's talk about why we have all this stuff. And this is more technical than just saying because it's like Amazon delivering stuff. But the delivery through the vessels is what's known as transportation, movement of material. So the material has to be acquired. The gases that is, when you talk about the movement of gas, it's not just oxygen, okay? There's carbon dioxide, there's nitrogen via nitrous oxide, there's sulfuric gases. Some gases are a little bit more toxic, if you will, and others are more valuable. For example, the one blood gas that's most valuable to us is oxygen. And when we utilize oxygen in our cells as a byproduct of cellular respiration, we will get carbon dioxide. So there's this happy back and forth between plants and animals on this planet, where plants use carbon dioxide and sunlight and water, and then they make sugars. And what they release as their waste is oxygen, and then that oxygen is beneficial to animals, and then the oxygen feeds our cells. And with water and oxygen and sugars or other nutrients, we're able to provide plenty of energy for the cells, which then allows for cellular metabolism, which is basically chemistry. And then that cell is part of a community of other cells that through their chemical interactions is contributing to the betterment of the body, contributing to the functionality of the body. It may be one of almost 100 trillion, but it's still there as a cell to provide benefit to the body as a whole. It's doing its job, it's doing the cellular job as it was programmed to do by the DNA. If DNA allowed it to develop properly and function properly, it will contribute in its one cellular way as it was designed to do. And whether that's ultimately to create movement or to create chemical instructions or to bind and be part of a membrane, whether it's designed to interact with other cells or protect other cells or even bind to blood gas to deliver blood gas. Whatever the cell's job is, it's there to benefit the rest of the body. All right, so we do want to get oxygen from the air. We breathe it in, and we also have some of it permeate across our skin. When we breathe in, if you breathe in right now, you're not breathing in 100% oxygen. You're breathing in enough oxygen. but you're also breathing in carbon dioxide that's in the air, nitrogen in different forms that's in the air. In fact, you're probably breathing in more nitrogen than you are oxygen and carbon dioxide, right? Just by taking a breath of air. But because of how chemistry and physics work, when you fill your lungs with that air, there's a certain amount of pressure of what we call the partial pressure of oxygen. There's a certain partial pressure of nitrogen. There's a certain partial pressure of nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide. There's different partial pressures of these gases. And that partial pressure is different than what's inside your blood vessels. And because gas is a fluid, as liquid is a fluid, as in other words, there's movement of that, whereas solids, there's not the same type of movement. So I wouldn't say that, the wooden table is fluid, but whatever liquid's in my cup, that's fluid. The air that's full of gas, that's fluid. And so whenever you have fluid, you can have movement of material. And the pressure of that gas that's in the air to the pressure of that gas that's in my blood vessels, they're different from each other. And because fluids are always about trying to balance, where there's more here and less here, they're trying to even out. Once there's an exchange, the goal is to exchange between those two membranes, right? Outside in the lungs. Okay, so the outside air, or if you will, the air that's in the lungs versus the air that's in the blood vessel. Okay, that amount of gas. When you breathe air in, there's much more oxygen in the lungs than there is in the blood vessels of the lungs. So a diffusion takes place. One of the things, and I'll push this when we're talking more of the respiratory system, but one of the things that where students can make a mistake is to think that oxygen changes with carbon dioxide. When you breathe in oxygen, and you breathe out carbon dioxide. Well, that's true to a degree. When you breathe in carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrous oxide, you breathe it all in. And when you breathe out oxygen and carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide, but the ratio is different. Because when you breathe air in, there's more oxygen in the air than there is oxygen in the blood. So oxygen goes into the blood rather than oxygen coming out of the blood. When you breathe in so much carbon dioxide, but there's more carbon dioxide in the blood than there is in the air. So carbon dioxide goes out to even up with what's in the air. Same thing, there's more nitrous oxide in your blood than there is in the air. So the nitrous oxide is breathed out. The point is that oxygen is actually exchanging with oxygen, carbon dioxide with carbon dioxide, nitrogen with nitrogen, etc. because of the pressure of the air volume versus the blood volume. So in other words, I'm not exchanging oxygen for carbon dioxide. I'm exchanging oxygen for oxygen so that it's more level, it's more equal. I'm exchanging carbon dioxide for carbon dioxide so where it's more equal between what's in the lungs and what's in the blood. You're trying to equal out what's in the lungs and what's in the blood. It's what diffusion does. Diffusion has a concentration of material. And when you put that material into another solvent or whatever fluid, it disperses evenly so that there's an equal distribution of that in that volume. So when you have a membrane between the lungs and the blood, and there's oxygen here relative to a lack of oxygen there, the oxygen goes this way into the blood. Carbon dioxide is greater here than here, so carbon dioxide goes out because high concentration to low concentration, in other words, where there's a lot to where it evens out to where there's less. It starts out with a lot, and the reason why it expands outward is because, let's say I take a lump of sugar, okay? It's all right there. It's all in the lump of sugar, and if I put that in water, there's no sugar in the water yet. So directionally, it just disperses outward toward where there's less and less until that water is equally distributed with all of that concentrated sugar. It's no longer concentrated. It's now spread out. If I add more sugar, it'll continue to do that until a point which it's saturated, and then the sugar won't dissolve anymore and equally distribute. It'll just settle. Okay, and you've all done that, I'm sure, when you were younger and you just kept adding sugar to your iced tea or cool. Eventually, you would just get sugar because it was too concentrated. These are just chemistry words. When you breathe in air exchange to blood exchange, it's really not oxygen to carbon dioxide. However, the goal is to get oxygen into the cells, get carbon dioxide out of the cells so that there's a nice balance. What I don't want my body to ever have to do is eat itself. I don't want my body to break down to feed other cells just to stay alive. That's actually what happens when the body's in starvation mode. If you've ever seen pictures of a person who is truly starving, where you can see all of the ribs through their skin and they look emaciated and atrophied and their eyes are dark and there's, in a sense, their body had to eat itself to keep the vital components of their body alive. It had to take its muscles, essentially digest its muscles, break down its muscles just to feed the brain and the heart, and to keep the body alive. It's desperation mode. You'd much rather take in food, plants and animals, break down those structures, get those structures into the bloodstream, and then deliver those basic nutrients to your cells so that the cells can use those nutrients in their chemical processes and function adequately without having to rely on, again, breaking down other parts of the body. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of recycling that happens in your body, okay? But recycling is different than physically having to break down cellular structure just to feed other cells. I don't want to break down my own body structure to feed other cells in the body. I want to break down a plant or an animal that doesn't belong to me and essentially steal their structure, steal their chemicals, steal their nutrients so that I can feed my cells. Because I'm sorry, when you eat a plant, you're not going to give it back to that plant, right? You're going to take all that plant's structure and whatever you can break down and digest, you're going to break it down to its tiniest little components, which will then go into the bloodstream and be delivered to cells. If you can't break it down, you're just going to eliminate it, right? Everybody's probably seen the corn that didn't break down and it left your body the way it went in. If you can't break it down and absorb it, if you can't put it in the blood, get rid of it. That's the digestive side of things. The rest of what you do digest and absorb, that's now mixed into the blood and then delivered to the cells. And when the cells are able to use those nutrients, their chemistries are expected. Which means, since cellular respiration and cellular metabolism generates what's called cellular waste, we will use the same delivery system, the same transportation system to remove the wastes as what we brought things to the cells for. That's what transportation means. Again, you have this network of blood vessels, which is estimated to be 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels. 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels inside your body. All right. So I'm assuming that means if you took every single blood vessel and put them in a straight line, because I'm not even a mile big, let alone 60,000 miles. However, the majority of that mileage in the mathematical realm would come from those microscopic tiny little capillaries because they are incredibly numerous, such that, again, there's troughs to feed the 100 million cells of your body. All right, now, to be fair, 100 trillion, that's a lot. 25 trillion are red blood cells that are carrying oxygen to the other 75 trillion. And again, 100 trillion is a round estimate. It's probably not quite 100 trillion total cells, but it's close enough. I mean, let's face it. if you won the lottery and you had $85 trillion that you just won, that's close enough to 100 trillion. I think you'll still be happy in just having the 85 trillion, you know? Anyway, the white blood cells of your body do not deliver oxygen. The white blood cells of your body do not deliver nutrients. They can be involved in removing wastes, but they certainly are involved in fighting the pathogens of the world. So let me tell you what a pathogen is. By definition, pathos, the Greek word for disease, pathogen is a disease-causing agent. The definition of a pathogen is a disease-causing agent. Pathogens may or may not be living entities. Bacteria has a pathogens living, fungus has a pathogens living, rickettsia has a pathogens living, other parasites, amoeba, paramecia, helminthes, worms, you know, they're all living. The virus has a pathogen, very up to debate as to whether or not it should be defined as living or not living. What we know of viruses is that viruses are bits of genetic material that ultimately change your cell's genetic material to do the work of the virus rather than as the cell was originally programmed. So the debate goes on as to whether or not we should define viruses as living entities or non-living entities or semi-living entities or pseudo-living or whatever the terminology you want to use is. A pathogen is a disease-causing agent. Is it possible that we can define elemental disease factors that are like radiation, for example, as a pathogen? Things that cause trauma could be pathogen oriented or pathogen labeled. So radiation does cause trauma to the body. So I would not be surprised if you heard in the pathogen discussion things like radiation. But we have a tendency to focus on more of the biological pathogens when it comes to what's known as public health. All right. So the virus, when we had our pandemic back in 2020, you know, that was a virus, shut down the world. And if you go back to 1918, right, we had another type of virus, an influenza, that pretty much shut down the world then at the time. You know, your whole life you've been dealing with bacteria, some good, some bad. Bacteria strains that can be aggressive, like some streptococcal strains, E. coli strains, some staphylococcal strains. But your immune system learns to recognize pathogens. It learns to recognize bacteria and fungus and viruses because of the genetic changes that you see to your cells with viruses. Some mutations in cellular expression can be discovered by the immune cells and then regularly part of the assault, if you will. See, what we'll come to find with the immunity and the immune cells is once an immune cell is programmed, it can be on a very specific seek and destroy for pathogens. And that's a really impressive thing to be able to, if you will, program a cell to go on a seek and destroy mission. In other words, it's not a generalized immunity, just you know, fighting everything. It's specifically designed to kill one type of thing. So all you have to do as a body is learn how to program your cell to go and recognize this. If you come across this pathogen, you will destroy it. All right, so pretend for a moment that science and technology is able to take a sample of blood, put it onto a special sensor that goes into a computer, and then the computer is able to identify the pathogens in that blood sample. And then you introduce another blood sample to the computer, where the computer then transmits that information to the new sample that has white blood cells in it, and the white blood cells now know, okay, if I come across any of these pathogens that were in the sample, I'm going to destroy them. Can you imagine if that technology existed to where, look, I've been exposed to this pathogen. I'm going to train my white blood cells to recognize the pathogen, go throughout my body, and just destroy all remnants of that pathogen in my body. Tell you what, you wouldn't need antibiotics anymore. You wouldn't need antifungals anymore. In fact, it seems to me that that would even be the way to eradicate cancer, because the same mechanism where the mutation of the cells of cancer would show up and recognize, then you can train white blood cells to recognize those types of cancer cells, and then those cells go back in the body on a seek and destroy mission, only attacking and killing the cells with cancer. Sounds pretty sci-fi, but what if I told you it already exists? And I'm not talking conspiracy theories. Back in 2014? No. We weren't in the new building yet. So I want to say it was like either 2008 through 2012, somewhere in that era. A team out of Marquette University in Milwaukee, using a test subject sample of 4 patients with a certain type of leukemia. These scientists, these doctors were able to take the leukemia blood out of the patients, take those patients' white blood cells, expose the white blood cells to the leukemia or to some marker of the leukemia, and I don't know the mechanism by which they did. I don't know if they, introduced the leukemia to virus cells. I don't know what they did. All I know is that somehow they were able to train white blood cells of those patients outside of their body to recognize that very specific strain of leukemia. They put their white blood cells back in, and those white blood cells did what they always do. They go on a seek and destroy mission now that they've been programmed. And sure enough, those patients went into remission. And whether or not they have the technology to do that with every type of cancer or just that type, I don't know. But it's the start of opening a door toward understanding how to better teach your body's white blood cells to it's referred to as specific immunity. All right. So backtrack to when the first vaccines were introduced, where science was able to recognize and doctors were able to recognize that, hey, once a person has been exposed to an illness, they're less likely to have that illness again if it's related to, say, a bacterial infection or a viral infection. In other words, the body learned from the initial infection how to identify future versions of that potential threat. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, let's say I'm talking about chickenpox. Have you had the chickenpox? If you have, can you get the chickenpox again? Theoretically, no, you cannot. And the reason why is because if you had the chickenpox and you were exposed to the virus that causes chickenpox, referred to as the herpes zoster virus, even though that virus is dormant somewhere in one of your nerve roots, you won't get chickenpox again. You may get shingles, but you won't get chickenpox again because your body recognized the virus. It produced antibodies so that if that virus shows up in any form, your white blood cells already have a head start on fighting the fight. Therefore, you shouldn't have the full infection, the full lesions with fever and all that. Now, later on in life, if you have a whole rash of shingles from that virus, that's because probably your immune system was compromised for some reason, suppressed for some reason, whether it's age related or illness related or stress related or too much sun exposure, because sunburns can do it, right? Then it triggers the virus to be able to replicate in the body without the protection of the immune system, and it shows up as what's known as shingles. But as far as chickenpox, your immune system learned about the virus. It learned to recognize cells affected by the virus, and the white blood cells, with the help of antibodies, were able to target those and prevent future infection from it. And science was able to see that and observe that. Doctors were able to recognize that. So at some point, science and medicine said, well, what if we put the virus into the person before they're actually exposed to it? What we'll do is we'll put in a version of the virus that's either half dead or, partly dead. And in other words, not enough of the virus to cause a person to become ill and potentially die from it, but enough exposure to the virus that, hey, your immune system is going to go ahead and learn from it, make antibodies to it, so that if you're ever exposed to it again, it's already in a head start. This is the theory behind vaccination. Inoculate the person with the virus, whether it's full virus or a dead virus or half dead virus, just depends on the virus, I guess. And we're talking initial vaccines. I'm not talking about mRNA vaccines or any of the newer technologies. I'm talking old school vaccines. I'm talking salt. What's the, trying to think of his first name? Salk. S-A-L-K is the doctor's name, Salk, who he's considered the doctor of immunology, or the father of immunology, because of his usage of those initial vaccines. And let's be really honest, is that there have been some vaccinations that have pretty much eradicated certain diseases from our population, right? I don't think you know anybody that's had smallpox. Maybe you have. I don't think so, though. You know why? Because vaccinations pretty much eradicated that from our population. Every now and again, there's some outbreaks, but smallpox is not nearly the worry as it was back in the 1800s, whenever, prior to vaccination. Polio is another one. As you went through World War I, polio was a problem. But very few people are afflicted with polio these days because of the vaccination. Do I think that every virus has a wonderful vaccine that means that you won't get it anymore? I won't go out on a limb to say that. No. Do I know whether or not vaccination during COVID was or was not effective? I can't say it wasn't effective, but I can't say that it eliminated COVID, not like smallpox, because even with vaccinations, people have gotten COVID. So, the immunologists will say, well, as there's various strains and the vaccines are only for certain strains and this and that. I don't know either way. I know that when you've got something called mass hysteria and you're looking for a potential cure, part of the cure is to quell that mass hysteria, if you will, to appease the public. And we could get on debates as to whether or not the vaccines do that or masking did that, or we don't have to discuss it. I'm just saying that, part of the whole approach to vaccinating when COVID was so bad was really partly to, help people with not having the severe effects of COVID, but the other side of that was to deal with the public fear of COVID. I have no doubt in my mind about that. So it's part of our immune discussion. It's part of our immunology discussion. I have no problems with vaccinations as a whole. I do think that people should be given the choice of whether or not they want to vaccinate. I've always wondered why certain school systems or jobs, you know, when if you require vaccination, for example, um, and I'll say it this way, and I've had debates and discussions with people on it, and we can go around and around. But like, for example, school systems that say, okay, the child has to be vaccinated in order to attend school here. So the question is, well, why does the child have to be vaccinated in order to attend school? Because if the other children are vaccinated, doesn't that mean that it shouldn't matter if this child is or isn't, because this child's not going to get the other children sick if they've been vaccinated. But can that child get sick from others if he hasn't or she hasn't been vaccinated? Sure. And maybe the school's more worried about the the child that's not vaccinated versus the children that are vaccinated. I really don't know. I do think, again, that there's a big debate on it because of efficacy and because of really who is the vaccine benefiting, but it'll just be a continuous debate. There's really no right or wrong answer. I'm personally a child of the military family. We had to get vaccinated. We had to get vaccinated to travel overseas. I was, vaccinated as a kid. Did I ever have any personal issues with the vaccines? No. As far as I know, no personal, no medical issues. Have vaccines been at the root of some big issues over the last 20, 30 years, including autism being blamed on vaccination? Perhaps, but I don't know. I'm not an immunologist, and I'm not defending, nor am I attacking the use of vaccinations. So I want people to make their own decisions and be educated on it, but I can't ever give anybody an answer as to why, like, for example, if somebody chooses not to get vaccinated, why that person shouldn't be allowed to still attend a school where everybody else is vaccinated, or work in a hospital, or work in an environment where everybody is vaccinated. I did have a debate or discussion, if you will, with an emergency room doctor, and I really enjoyed this conversation, actually, because he looked at me and he said, I don't. This is what the emergency room doctor told me. Okay, and I'll go over this one in a second with you on the chat. He said to me, as an emergency room doctor, I don't really deal much with. My job is to assess quickly, triage, and make a decision as to what we need to do to keep somebody alive, or to keep somebody, get somebody out of pain, or whatever the approach was. He said, I personally, as a medical physician, don't put much faith in screenings. In other words, where you do colon screenings or heart screenings. So as a medical physician, he didn't really believe much in screenings because there's too many false negatives and false positives in the screening world, and false negatives can create medical situations where there was none. False positives means you missed stuff. So he wasn't big on that, but he looked at me and he said this. He said, I vaccinate not because I'm worried about me. I vaccinate because I'm in an environment where I'm working with people who could potentially be compromised from me spreading to them. So if I vaccinate myself, then I am doing everything in my power to make sure that I do not pass on this potential illness to those that could potentially die from it. And that was a big, and I wouldn't say a wake-up call to me, but it was one of those where I thought, okay, so I'm going to worry not about me, but I'm going to worry about those around me. So should I choose to approach it this way, it's not necessarily because I'm worried that I don't want to get sick or whatnot. It's I don't want to get others sick. And I appreciated that. And I haven't forgotten it. And I think it's a good model. And I wish that would have been an approach that the entire world would have taken during COVID. All right, let's see. So Ina says, I worked with a paid, and her argument was that kids all need to be vaccinated because even if vaccinated kids can be asymptomatic carriers and get unvaccinated kids sick and then spread the pathogen to others they come in contact with, that they also may be unvaccinated due to the choice or babies who are too young for vaccine. All right, let me read that one more time a little slower. Her argument was that kids all need to be vaccinated because even vaccinated kids can be asymptomatic carriers. Yeah. It's the same thing as what the doctor was saying. Is that right? Essentially what I said. But we're talking about when school systems aren't letting kids come in because they're not vaccinated. So then that means the school system's worried about the unvaccinated kid, not so much about those who are vaccinated. But if a parent decides that I don't want to have my child vaccinated, it's the parent that's taking the risk, not really the school. So again, you can get in that big debate. But yes, I agree with, I think that's a good approach personally. So vaccines are going to be a part of our society, and that's a part of immunity. Again, if you could truly train every or your immune cells to recognize individual, every little specific pathogen, antigen, whatever, then you could eradicate vaccines and antibiotics and all that, because the approach would be, all right, here's the illness, here's how it expresses chemically or whatever. Let's teach the white blood cell how to recognize that, and then the white blood cells go in the body and go on seek and destroy missions. I don't know if we'll see that as the standard of care, or if there'll be a shift in the medical approach to where that's, if that technology does become available, the better question is will that become the main approach? And there's a part of me that says, as long as there's money to be made, then absolutely it will. There's the other part of me that says, that if that creates if you will, that there's the cynic side of me that says, all right, if that puts hospitals out of business because they're not making money off the sick, what does that do? Could that mean that interferes with that technology ever being used effectively? I don't know. That's the cynical side. The positive side is, if that technology does become effective, then essentially people are living longer because there's not as much as far as the illness and sorry, I went off on a tangent. I apologize, but that all falls into this protection side of the cardiovascular system. It's the immunity that we discuss. So it's important then, if you're using a system of blood vessels to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide and nutrients and waste, and to transport our immune cells, it's important to make sure that those blood vessels aren't damaged. It's important to make sure that the piping, if you will, is fully closed so that the blood stays in the pipes. If a blood vessel were to burst, blood would just leak out into free space and it's not able to be delivered. So part of what we find in the overall delivery system is a set of cell parts that, should there be any damage to the lining of the vessels, these cell parts will quickly go to work to plug up the damage and allow the repair structures of the body to fix the damaged vessels. So in the blood, we'll find blood clotting factors, which are used to make sure that if there's a break to any blood vessel, then absolutely we can plug up the break and stop the blood loss. Look, I don't want blood anywhere except in the blood vessels. It's that simple. Your blood needs to stay in your blood vessels. Should a blood vessel break and it leaks out, it's not usable. And again, we can make an analogy to a water main. If a water main breaks, all that water just starts leaking out everywhere, right? I don't know if you've ever seen a broken water main on a city street where it's just jetting out from the roadway or from the area of the sewer or wherever the water is spewing from. All that water is leaving the pipe. It's not going to stay in the pipe because there's pressure in the pipe. There's no pressure outside the pipe. So it goes from high pressure to low. It just shoots out. And all that water is now unusable. It's not making it to the house. It's not drinkable. It's water that's just going to flood around the area. And well, that's what happens when your blood vessels break too. And in the nervous system, we saw that stroke. We saw that hemorrhagic stroke where the blood vessel in the brain burst and the blood just leaked out and pooled into free space, putting pressure against the brain. But that's blood that's not getting delivered to the cells of the brain, and the brain dies as a result. We call that break to a blood vessel hemorrhaging, which is science for bleeding. Heme means blood. The suffix "ria" or in the case of hemorrhage, RRHAGE or RRHEA, it means excessive. When it's RRHEA, it's excessive flow. And if it's more of like hemorrhage, when we say it that way, then it's more of excessive loss. You know, it's just gone. It's not going where it needs to go. So this suffix RRHAGE, that is blood loss, excessive blood loss. If it was hemorrhea, again, RRHEAE, it's excessive bleeding. But I don't care if you say it as hemorrhage or hemorrhea, the blood is not staying in the blood vessel. So this is the goal of cardiovascular system, is to understand how transportation occurs, how immunity occurs, which it's an immune protection, and how we can combat loss of blood so that we don't have issues. Some statistics. You are probably somewhere in the area of having a blood volume of about 11 to 12 pints. If you prefer the metric system, you're somewhere, your blood volume in your body is somewhere between 5 to 6 liters. 11 to 12 pints. Okay. Roughly around 5 liters of blood. So if you don't know how much that is, and you have any 2-liter bottles of soda at your home, take 2 liters, 2 of those 2-liter bottles, and the third one that's half filled. And that's the amount of blood you have in your body. 2 liters, 4 liters, 5 liters. Yep. And all that circulating away from the heart, back to the heart, away from the heart, back to the heart, away from the heart, back to the heart, away from the heart, back to the heart. 5 liters, 11 to 12 pints of blood. So imagine if a blood vessel burst and you lost, I don't know, 2 of those 11 to 12 pints. That's enough blood loss to cause some serious issues. If you've ever donated blood and they took a pint, you may have felt a little lightheaded or a little tired or a little cold. And that's just one of the 12 pints, right? One of the 11 to 12 pints. Imagine a bleed from an injured blood vessel where you lost more than 2 pints. In fact, you probably wouldn't remember it much because you'd probably go into shock and maybe not survive that. If you lost a full liter of blood, ooh, it's pretty tough to survive that. So take away just that half full 2-liter bottle and just those two liters where it's just 4 liters of blood. Even if that's all you had left, you're probably not surviving. It's not enough blood volume to keep the cells of your body maintaining that constant delivery. So if a person's bled out and died as a result, it's because they lost too much blood. And eventually there was enough blood loss to where they weren't able to maintain that constant pressure, that constant push of blood. And they ultimately couldn't survive that. So again, you go to those movies and TV shows where people are in the emergency room and they go into shock. Shock is that plummeting of blood pressure, most often because of a bleed. like, for example, a surgical bleed, or they come into the emergency room with a gunshot wound and there's internal bleeding and there's too much blood loss. And as a result of the blood loss, they're just not able to maintain that constant pressure. They go into shock. And if they're not able to stop the bleed, if they're not able to get them on a quick transfusion and restore that pressure, that person may not survive. It most likely does not survive. All right. So let's talk about blood. I've taught it a number of different ways over the years. I think one of my favorite analogies of blood, to compare it to something, is to say blood is like stew. Not thin like chicken noodle soup, more thickened, maybe more of a chowder. That's Boston style, not Manhattan style. It is thick. It is warm. It is red. It's slightly alkaline. What does that mean? It means that if you look at what's called pH, the partial pressure of hydrogen, or if you will, the acidity scale, 1 to 14. 1 is the acidic side, 14 is the basic or alkaline side, 7 is neutral. It's what we call pH. It's our acidity scale, right? pH, when it's very acidic, like hydrochloric acid, is very close to 1. Chlorine, which is very basic, is closer to 14. Neutral is right at 7. Blood should be more on the 14 side than on the 1 side of 7. About 7.2 to 7.3 on your pH scale for acidity. More basic than acidic, which means that if there's any changes to the blood, it can easily shift back on the wrong side of 7, and that's when there's what's referred to as an acidic blood. So, for example, if a person is purposely trying to break down proteins without the benefit of breaking down carbohydrates or fats, especially when the body starts breaking down its own proteins, one of the waste products of that type of protein digestion is the accumulation of the waste known as a ketone. And as more and more ketones are being removed by the blood, it shifts the acidity on the wrong side of 7, on the acidic side, and that person's developed what's called ketoacidosis. It's kind of the goal of the keto diet. In fact, it's the ketoacidosis diet. You're trying to get your body to be more acidic, or at least the blood to be more acidic. In a regular situation, though, your blood is slightly alkaline. So, first of all, why is it thick? It's thick because there's a lot of stuff mixed into it, which is why I called it stew, right? It's thick because it's not just water. It's water with cells mixed into it. It's water with wastes mixed into it. It's water with proteins mixed into it. It's water with nutrients from your food mixed into it. It's water with hormones and other chemicals mixed into it. With it's an amalgamation of a lot of things mixed together. And so the more you add to the mixture, the thicker it gets. In fact, not only is it thick, but it's sticky a little bit. So let's say I've got a cup of water and I've got a cup of blood, and I throw the cup of water on the wall, and I watch the water run down the wall. It sticks to the water a little, or it sticks to the wall a little bit, but it runs down very quickly, and the water ends up mostly on the floor. Take the blood, throw it at the same level of the wall as the water, and it sticks to the wall, and it slowly works its way down the wall, with a lot of it staying stuck to the wall as it dries upon the wall. And by the time it gets to the very floor, there's not nearly as much liquid volume as what we saw from the water, because a lot of it's stuck or adhered to the wall. And that, again, has a lot to do with some of the proteins that are mixed into the blood. Proteins are folded, they're links, they're chains, and they have given their shape, would get caught on some of the, the wall's anything but super smooth, so it gets caught on the ridges of the wall, and it essentially sticks to it. So whether you want to include adhesive or not, that's your choice, but it's got a viscosity to it. And viscosity as a word means it's got a thickness to it. I don't want blood to be so thick that it's hard to move it through the blood vessels, but I don't want it to be so thin that it's missing the ingredients that you would mix into it that are beneficial to the cells of your body. All blood should be thicker than water. See what I did there? Blood is thicker than water. That is a literal and a figurative statement. It is viscous. Why is blood warm? Because your blood vessels carry blood through your muscles, and your muscles generate heat. And so the blood helps that heat dissipate. And so as blood leaves the muscles and comes back to the core of the body, it comes back warmer than body temperature, and it cools down to your body temperature. So if your body temperature in the Fahrenheit scale is around 98.6 degrees, the blood should measure almost a full to a full and a half degree warmer, to where it would be 99.9 degrees Fahrenheit. In the Celsius scale, it's 37 degrees body temperature, 37.6 degrees blood temperature, almost a little more than half of a degree temperature on the Celsius scale warmer. But blood is considered warmer than body temperature. Blood is warm. Blood is alkaline. Blood is thick. But the surprising thing you might not know is that blood is always red. I'll say it again. Blood is always red. It is not blue. You could be the biggest fan of St. Louis hockey. Your blood is not blue. You can identify as a Smurf. Your blood is not blue. You can identify as Vulcan, like Mr. Spock from Star Trek. Your blood is not green. And the reason why Mr. Spock's blood was green, by the way, was because unlike our blood, which is iron-based, his blood was copper-based. And if you know anything about copper, right? Yeah, copper looks like a penny, right? Or does it? Because if you've ever seen a copper penny when it gets old, it starts to get that blue that you see in the desert, like the Taos blue. That's copper. It's not rusting, but it has that bluish color. And so Mr. Spock had blue or green blood, that bluish green, teal blood, whatever color, as a result of having a copper-based blood. We have iron-based blood. Is iron what makes our blood red? Technically, it's not the iron. The iron is what binds to the oxygen. Technically, it's the rest of the molecule that the iron is part of, called hemoglobin, which literally means blood protein. Blood protein hemoglobin is red. It is always red. It is never blue. It is never purple. It is always red. And then iron, which is part of the hemoglobin, binds to gas. When oxygen is on the iron, it makes the hemoglobin appear bright red. When carbon dioxide is bound to the iron, it looks more brick red. So the brightness becomes more dull. So you'll have different colors of red, but never blue. So think of it this way. You go to a paint store and you want, or you go to for not everybody on this, but some on this Zoom meeting lecture. You go into the, I want to say the makeup store, but I just can't think of the other word for it. Anyway, you're going to go buy makeup. You're going to go buy lipstick, right? And you know, when you go to buy lipstick, there's different colors of lipstick, different colors of red, right? Now, for those that wear lipstick, you probably know better than I the different colors of lipstick, the different colors of even red lipstick. Look, whether it's a paint store or whether it's the lipstick counter, there are certain colors of red that to me look the exact same, even though they're called something different. My wife will say, no, this red's this, right? Because her eyes can distinguish those shades a little bit differently than my eyes can. I'm not colorblind, I'm just male, and males aren't as good at the distinction of colors, especially red and green. So if I was holding a vial of oxygen-rich blood next to a vial of oxygen-poor blood, it would be like looking at two different lipstick colors of red. A brighter oxygen lipstick color of red, a darker, more brick color of oxygen-poor blood of red. But it's still red. Is it true that the darker red may appear a little bit more on the purplish bluish side? I guess you could argue that, but it's still red, right? So whether it's the paint store, whether it's the lipstick counter, still trying to think of what it's called when you go into a makeup store, what the makeup store is called. A beauty shop, a beauty salon. Okay, I don't know. Anyway, different colors of red, and your blood is always red. When I was a kid, I heard it all the time. Oh, your blood's blue until it hits the air and then the oxygen turns it red. It's blue. I've even seen videos on the internet, animated videos where you go, and the blue cells, when exposed, well, bright red. No, how about the dark red becomes brighter, more vivid red? It's like the red of a scarlet versus the red of a maroon. I mean, they're different, but they're still red. Okay. So those four characteristics for blood will always be the same. Always red, always warm, always thick, and always alkaline slightly. Okay. And when I say always, that's what we expect. Can blood change to where it's not alkaline anymore, it's acidic? Yes. Can that cause problems? Absolutely. Can the thickness of blood change to where it's too thick or too thin? Absolutely. And it causes problems. Can the temperature of blood be affected to where it's not warm or it's too? Absolutely. But again, that's problems. And can blood be, what did I forget to say? Okay, acidic? Yes. Instead of alkaline. Can it be too thin? Yes. Can it be too warm or cold? Yes. Can it be, I guess, too bright or too dark? Yeah. No, I don't know much about the color side of things, but definitely we see problems with blood when it's not alkaline like it's supposed to be, when it's not the right viscosity, and when it's not the right temperature. Those would lead to certain pathologies, right? Or they'll be the result of certain pathologies. So what I want from blood, the right thickness, the right alkalinity, the right temperature, and I prefer the oxygen-rich blood. But most of the 5 liters of your blood right now, 3 of the 5 liters, in fact, right now, is going to be darker red, oxygen poor, making its way from your body back to the heart, through the veins of your body, waiting to be sent to the lungs to go get oxygenated. Only about 1 liter is going out to your body right now full of oxygen, and the other missing liter is currently feeding your cells in your capillaries. And that's on average, it's not an exact. Of the 5 liters of blood, about 1 liter is in your capillaries feeding your cells. About 1 liter is trying to get to your capillaries, oxygen rich, and the other 3 liters are working their way back to the heart from the body, oxygen deprived, waiting to be sent to the lungs to go get more oxygen. It's interesting that blood cannot be synthesized. And what I mean by that is artificially synthesized. I cannot just make blood out of, say, a 3D printer, 4D printer, excuse me. I don't know if it's 3D or 4D printer. 3D sounds right. I can't just mix chemicals and call it blood and put it into your body. What I can do is take somebody else's blood and put it into your body, as long as the blood matches to your body, because guess what? Certain people have different types of blood where certain proteins on the blood would be recognized by another person's immune system as foreign, and that immune system would then go on the attack. It says whole blood. Blood. Notice that when you look at blood, it looks like blood. The word, I mean. Your blood may have a certain type of characteristic called an antigen that somebody else's immune system would recognize as foreign. Your blood may not have that antigen. You would only know if you've had your blood typed, not typed as in typed out, BLOOD. I mean, if you've had your blood taken and then they told you if you were a blood type A or a blood type B, or maybe a mix of blood AB, or maybe you were told you're blood type O. If you have the blood type known as blood type A, and you need to get somebody else's blood, it better have A or O. It better never have any B, because a person who's got A blood type already has immune cells to protect you from any blood that's B blood type. So any form of blood with B in it, that person's immune system would attack. However, the O blood, it's really not an O, it's a 0 because there are no antigens on it. The immune system of the receiving person's body wouldn't recognize it as foreign, and there would not be an immune response to it. So A people need to get A blood or O blood. B people need to get B blood or O blood. The person who has both A and B blood can get A blood and B blood and O blood. Isn't that cool? Your blood was A positive in your first trimester. You flipped to A negative. What? What? I could understand if you were negative that flipped to positive, but positive flipping to negative, what's the phenomenon? It's got to be known as something. Have they figured out what to call it yet? Huh. Well, that'd be really cool. So your blood was A positive, and so did you have to start? Oh wait, the baby was negative, so you didn't have to go on any of the medicine then. Doc said it only hereditary, super rare. You did have to go on Rogam because of the flip. Yeah. So here's the thing, though. Yeah. As long as baby's negative, though, you shouldn't need to be on Rogam. That's just a safety precaution, right? Unless they were worried about your positive flipping back in the baby, and so the oh gosh, yeah, sounds pretty rare. Okay, I can't wait till they. Hey, you know what you ought to do, Ina? You ought to see if they still haven't put a name to it. If you can name it, and then put your family name on it, since you and 3 sisters had it. Yes. Perfect. Okay. So when you're worried about blood type, you know, one of the concerns is, yes, if mom has a certain type of blood type and then dad has a different type of blood type, you know, what's the baby's blood type going to be? Well, the way genetics works is that there's, you know, A blood, there's B blood, there's O blood. And for the most part, the AB part of blood typing and the O part, there's really not that great of a risk as far as, let's say mom is A, dad's B, baby could be A, baby could be B, baby could be both A and B because of the way the genetics work out. The only real issue you have to worry about is something that we don't already have antibodies to, and that's called the Rh factor, which is that positive or that negative. Yeah, Punnett square. I don't miss the Punnett square at all. The positive and negative that you saw that Ina mentioned, that's what's referred to as the Rh factor. See, you're born with a certain blood type, and your immune system learns how to recognize your blood. And so you develop antibodies, innate antibodies to a different or a wrong blood type, which is why you wouldn't really be able to survive receiving the wrong blood type from a transfusion. But when baby is born, baby has both mom's genetics and dad's genetics. So the issue comes about not with something we already have antibodies to, but what you can develop antibodies to. And it's referred to as the Rh factor, named after the rhesus monkey where this was first identified. If mom is Rh negative and dad is Rh positive, and baby ends up with the Rh positive because of dad, that blood mixes with mom's Rh negative blood, and she will develop antibodies to that Rh factor. And typically the first pregnancy is not affected. But the next time mom's exposed to that negative, or excuse me, that positive, when her blood's negative, she's going to have an immune response to it. So if she gets pregnant again with an Rh positive baby, it's possible that her body attacks the embryo as if it was foreign. It's possible it causes miscarriage, birth defects, a number of things. So RhoGAM as a medication is designed to suppress the immune system so that you essentially don't have that response to be able to recognize the wrong Rh factor. If mom's already Rh positive, it's a moot point. But if mom's Rh negative, that's when there's the concern. So what happened was in the discussion is that, all of a sudden you have this flip to what was a positive is now a negative, and you've got to be real concerned that there's a mixing of positive and negative Rh leading toward antibodies, that you don't want those antibodies attacking negative blood. So that's why the treatment was, well, there's a flip, you're on RhoGAM now. We're going to suppress this immune system so that there's not that assault. So when obstetricians have Rh negative, it doesn't matter AB, or O. When obstetricians have moms that are Rh negative, they're going on RhoGAM. I even know some obstetricians, even if dad's Rh negative as well, they still put them on RhoGAM because of the negative Rh, so that if there's ever been any potential pregnancy that they didn't know about where there was an Rh positive, that potentially led to antibodies. So that's the kind of theory behind that. So in real specific blood typing, you talk about 8 different blood types because you're always talking about positive and negative Rh with it. But in general blood typing, all we care about is A, B, and O. Is there an A? Is there a B? Is there an O? And the testing world is all about who's the universal donor and who's the universal recipient. Now, I don't know. Honestly, I think I'm O positive. I think when I was a kid, I had a test that showed I was O positive. I'm pretty sure I'm O positive. My wife is A positive. For some reason, I thought she was, no, maybe she's B positive. Oh, shoot. Now I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to look and see what my kids are. Yeah, I think she's B positive. I don't know. She's not O like I am. And I'm pretty sure I'm O. But because she was positive, I'm positive, it didn't matter. She didn't have to go on RhoGAM. Had she had been negative, different story as far as that goes. But once upon a time, before DNA testing and all that, if you had, say, mom who was A and dad who was O, and yet baby came out B, you have to question that Punnett square, right? How do you get a B if there's no B's in there? And whether or not there truly are some recessive things in the O or not, I couldn't tell you, but it was kind of a way to say, well, baby's blood proves that you're not the father. So on the Maury show, it wouldn't have been a DNA test, it would have been a blood typing test. I, on the other hand, have much more faith in DNA testing than blood typing, where DNA would show familial, DNA from mom's side, dad's side, and you would have, without a doubt, DNA matching to both parents. So you can be much more assured that on the Maury show with DNA testing that the person is or is not the father. I'm still waiting for one of those shows where they say you are not the mother, but I haven't seen that show yet. All right. So as far as blood typing, it's not going to make a difference in the massage therapy world what blood type a person is. Theory is that blood typing was the result of diet and genetics as a result of the diet. And once upon a time when human beings were more separated by land masses and oceans and things of that sort, where there was a lot more intrapersonal population, right? Before there was a lot more diversity of mix, that you ended up with the blood typing in that capacity. All right, internet says the antigen change is likely due to de-antigen expression in 2 to 4% of women for the thing that you've got. Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty crazy that it can switch like that. All right. Only 2 to 4% of the population. Yeah, it's pretty rare. Okay, so you know, if you're a certain blood type, you want to get your blood type. If I have no antigens as an O person, especially if I was O negative, the Red Cross would want my blood all the time because my O can go to an A, can go to a B, right? The fact that I'm negative can go to negatives and positives. Uh, so that's kind of the way it works. The O is really a zero. It's blood that can be donated to anybody. But if you're A, you better have A or O. If you're B, you better have B or O. But again, if an A and a B have offspring, there's a percentage that their offspring could have A and B blood, which means that they can receive A blood, they can receive B blood, they can receive O blood. So even though it's the rarest of blood types, if you happen to be AB blood type, you can receive anybody's blood in a transfusion situation. It's pretty nice. But look, I'm O. I can't have any blood that's got A in it. I can't have any blood that's got B in it. I can't receive an A's blood or a B's blood. I can't receive the AB blood. I need O blood. And because O type blood is the most common in the world, it's what's needed the most in blood banks. Not only because it can be used for A's and B's, but it has to be used for O's. So again, that's kind of the concept of blood. It cannot just be synthesized in a artificial way, right? So there may be artificial hearts and there may be cochlear implants and things like that that help, but I have to get somebody else's blood if I am in need of blood. It has to be from a donor. Okay, that's the nature of blood. It cannot be synthesized artificially. So take all the 5 liters out of your body, right? And I guess it would be, if you're a 100-pound person, it would be 8 pounds worth of blood in that 5 liters. That seems like a lot of weight for 5 liters of blood. That's crazy. I don't know if that's because of its thickness or its volume, but 8 pounds. I'm curious now if I were to pick up those 2 bottles of soda and that 3rd bottle that's half filled, if I put that on the scale, if it would measure, well, I guess it's of your body weight anyway. So, curious. I do like the fact that it says 5 liters or 12 pints because that is a true statement. Whole blood in vessels is 55% plasma and 45% blood cells. You know what that means? That means that if you take your thick blood and you separate the parts, 55% of it's going to be the fluid liquid part, and 45% are the formed elements, or if you will, the cells that are mixed into your blood. So if you had some kind of way to pour your blood over like a coffee filter, and all the fluid of it went through the filter and all the cells stayed like coffee grounds, 45% of that volume would remain on the paper side being filtered out from the plasma. Now, you don't need a filter to actually separate the cells from the plasma, the liquid. All you need is gravity. I said it. But what you do is you use gravity and you spin it around really fast, right? So that now you've got so much inertia momentum going one way that all the dense stuff pushes and the lesser dense stuff goes to one part of the vial and the heavier dense cells go to the other part of the vial, and it separates the plasma from the cells. I like to call the centrifuge, which is the device that you put a vial of blood in to separate plasma from cells, I like to call the centrifuge the Tom's Twister of blood, or the gravitron of blood. If you've never been to Six Flags, then you don't know what Tom's Twister is. Tom's Twister is a ride where you get in, and as it spins and spins and spins, you're stuck against the wall. And then when the ride stops, you go down, and then you leave the ride, and then you puke. Yes, that's right. If you do not know what gravitron is the same basic thing, but instead there's a DJ in the middle that's sitting there center, boom, 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 with flashing lights, and you're spinning around the DJ stuck to the wall, and between the flashing lights and the spinning around in the circle, and then you get out and you puke. Centrifuges are used by astronauts in training, used by pilots in training. They'll get in and they'll basically go in circles and let those gravitational forces against their body so they can train their body how to prevent blood flow from not going to their brain. Because if there's enough gravitational force, it's too much pressure, your heart can't pump blood to your brain, you'll pass out. So they use the centrifuge as a way to train for the signs of getting ready to pass out, so they know how much they can take as far as pressure against their bloodstream. In other words, let's say I'm in a jet, right? And I'm pulling this jet so that I'm trying to go up and do this loop. As I'm going up and the engines are pushing one way and I'm going the other way and gravity's pushing this way, gravity's pushing blood out of my brain, my heart's trying to push blood up to my brain, and there's just not enough force because there's so much gravitational force against me that my body now weighs 10 to 12 times what it should weigh. So if I'm a 200-pound person, it would weigh 2,000 pounds, if not 2,200 pounds, that my heart has to squeeze again, and it just can't do it. And so the blood doesn't get to my brain and I pass out. That's why pilots train in the centrifuge. The centrifuge creates that gravitational load that physically separates the plasma from the cells. So all the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are at one part of the vial, and all the liquid plasma is on the other. And it's almost 50-50. It's about 55% plasma, 45% cells, and more than 99.9% of the cells are red blood cells. For every 600 red blood cells, it's about 660, in fact, for every one white blood cell. In a typical vial of blood, in what's called a deciliter of that vial, a deciliter, which is 1/10 of an actual liter. No, not 1/10. Let's see. A milliliter is 1,000, so a deciliter, yeah, I guess it's a tenth instead of 1,000th. Either way, whatever the actual volume is, you expect to find in that little bit of volume 6 million red blood cells and only about 10,000 white blood cells, and anywhere from 180 to 200,000 little platelets. Okay, 6 million to 10,000. Take away all those zeros, it's like 600, a little over 600 to 1. So it's pretty crazy how that works. Since I had the computer trouble, I'm going to go for just another few minutes to kind of summarize the blood, and then I'll stop. All right. So if you need to leave because it's 5, go ahead and check out. But if not, just go with me for another few minutes so I can at least summarize this part of the blood. So when you see this vial right here, let me show you a vial of blood. You see how the vial so here's the whole volume. The 50% mark would be about right here, and it's a little bit more of this yellowish clear plasma, and then the whole bottom is red with this little foamy layer. Okay, we actually call that the foamy layer. Of this plasma, 91% of it is water. If you're not sure what the word solute means, solute is kind of where the word solution comes from. That's all of the stuff mixed into the plasma, dissolved into the plasma. It's the solution. It could be salts, wastes, nutrients, gases, hormones, proteins. It's got things dissolved into it, but 90 to 91% of it's water. Water. Even if you go inside the cells, most of what's inside the cells is water. All right. So this is a centrifuged vial of blood. It didn't start out this way, right? You remember, if you've never donated blood, which very few people have not, let me say it properly. Some people donate blood, but others have to have their blood drawn for medical purposes. If you've never had your blood drawn, if you've never had blood taken out of your vein, here's kind of the process. What the phlebotomist or the vein technician, if you will, is going to do is use usually a type of rubbery strap, wrap it around your arm so that it puts pressure against the venous return that's going back to the heart. That allows the veins near your elbow to become a little bit more congested. The vein tech will basically take the needle directionally face toward the heart, go into that superficial vein, and then put a vial that's been vacuumed out as far as the air, and they'll pierce on the backside of the needle that they put into the vein has another needle, and it pierces through a rubber stopper that's at the top of the vial, and that vacuum then draws the blood out of the vein into the vial, and as the vial fills, it fills with blood that's coming from your vein, a dark red blood, but it's a vial of blood. Okay, they take that vial and put it in a centrifuge and spin it around, 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 and it spins around so fast that the dense stuff goes toward the bottom, which is the red area here, and the lesser dense stuff, which is the plasma, goes toward the top. Now it's separated. It will eventually remix if you let it sit long enough, or if you mix it again, but for the few minutes that it's separated, not much different than if you've ever gone into a bar and seen the way bartenders will mix certain cocktails to where they're in layers. That's because of different densities of the fluid. With that said, if you want to sample the plasma, you can take a little bit out of the top of the vial, and guess what? It's all plasma concentration that you're sampling. But if you want to sample the cells, the shape of the cells, size of the cells, the volume of cells, you can go all the way into the bottom of the vial and pull out those cells, and now you get a nice look at the cells without all of the other component of blood. So this is what we call blood composition. And what I plan on doing with you when I see you again on Tuesday is looking at this blood sample and talking about what red blood cells are, what white blood cells are, what platelets are, and those are the formed elements in the 45%. Then I want to talk about all the stuff that mixes into plasma so that we know what blood is. Let's see what this says here. Do you know the percentage of platelets and erythrocytes, or is that variable based on the patient? So it's always with this vial, they base it on deciliters, and it's going to be about 6 million red blood cells to 10,000 white blood cells in that deciliter to about 180,000 platelets. So as far as percentage, the red blood cells of this zone, 99.9% are red blood cells. Less than 1%, less than 1% are the white blood cells and platelets in that vial. Okay, 99% plus are erythrocytes, which are red blood cells. All right, so we're going to learn those words. Erythrocytes as red blood cells, leukocytes as white blood cells, thrombocytes, which means clot cells, as platelets. We're going to look at all that, and that is going to be our discussion Tuesday. Sound good? All right, thanks for the extra time. Again, I apologize for the computer hiccup. I thought I was all ready to go with it, and it just would not. It just kept on the little circle. It actually went to like a fade, like I could see myself, but faded, like blurry, and it just kept spinning. So hopefully that does not happen again. Anyway, if you want, please take a look at the Salvo book, chapter 26. Look over just a quick glance of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, so that when we discuss them on Tuesday, we'll all be on the same page. All right, then I'll see you Tuesday, 3 p.m. Look for this link here in just a bit, and Ina will send the notes to me, and I'll make sure they're attached. All right, good night, everybody.